Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA Podcast. Hope everybody's well on this Monday. I'm joined, as I was a couple of weeks ago, by two columns from Meath, Colm O'Rourke and Colm Keys, and Rory O'Neill as always. How are we doing, lads?
Very good, Mikey.
Very good.
Good stuff.
Sorry, Colm.
Jackie Tyrrell will be along later to talk about hurling, for those of you who want to listen to that. But we'll start with the big one, which of course was this morning's Tailteann Cup Draw, which took place on Morning Ireland, which is where all good GAA draws take place. Monday morning, 400,000 people trapped in their cars. They're going to know what's going on. It is, as predicted, let's be honest, it's a north-south draw. We kind of predicted there'd be a few meh fixtures. There's quite a lot of them. The preliminary round in the south is Wexford v Offaly, and then it's Wicklow v Waterford. And whoever wins those two matches play each other in the first round. So Wexford get to play Offaly, who they played already in the championship. And if they themselves and Wicklow win, they get to play each other in their customary fortnightly fixture. Carlow, Tipperary, Laois, Westmeath are the other first round games. New York get a bye into the quarterfinals of the southern section. And in the north section, it's Longford v Fermanagh, Leitrim v Antrim, Sligo v London, and Cavan v Down. Colm O'Rourke, I was looking at these this morning, and we always try to pull out a fixture to kind of to hook it on, you know, and say this is the match of the first round of the Tailteann Cup, and I have to say we struggled.
Yeah, well, I suppose the two counties that probably feel they shouldn't be in it would be Cavan and Down, and I suppose maybe that's the best game. And I'd say Cavan are favourites to win it out, and probably justifiably so. I often wonder with some of these counties, the likes of, say, Tipperary and Cavan, who would feel maybe that if they got to the provincial final, they would avoid playing in the Tailteann Cup and be in the championship proper, which they would be better off in. Same would apply there to Tipperary. And if the Tailteann Cup was bigged up to be something important, I think to be better off in the Tailteann Cup and going and winning that. But the big problem with the Tailteann Cup again is there has been no promotion of it, no launch of it, no new sponsor, no idea is there going to be all-stars for the winner, is there going to be trips away for the finalists, that sort of stuff. So it's starting off in limbo, and the concern I would have is there's no games going to be particularly inspiring, but will there be wholesale exodus of players from these counties to the United States over the next few weeks?
Yeah, that is the fear. Colm Keys, the launch is happening today, but I suppose they needed the counties in it. But the launch, as Colm O'Rourke says, there wasn't, there was very little fanfare or hoo-ha about this. And we've been talking about it on the podcast for weeks, which I suppose does count as promotion of type. But it's a bit cart before the horse, isn't it?
I suppose in one respect, it was difficult to have a launch when you didn't know exactly who was in it. The last two teams were only decided over the weekend with Tipperary and Westmeath, and there's representatives from players from all the counties convening in Croke Park today for the official launch. And obviously the preliminary rounds are this weekend. It probably didn't help that Wexford and Offaly, a repeat fixture, was the first out of the draw this morning, but that's a consequence of the geographical divide that is there in this competition. And some people reacted on hearing that last week with dismay, as if the goalposts had been changed, but that was in the small print from the outset, that there would be a geographical divide. It's obviously based on trying to initiate local rivalries. It's to obviously cut down on costs and travel for supporters and indeed for teams too. But it probably makes it that little bit less attractive that you've some of the renewal of provincial games. It just feels like certainly the southern section has a look of a Leinster round robin about it. I've said before, I think it won't really take off until it gets down to the semi-finals and you have that exclusive Sunday afternoon billing. Obviously, there'll be television and it will be the only show in town. However, that draws in people remains to be seen. And obviously, the final is a precursor for for the first All-Ireland semi-final in early July. Probably would have helped if it was on the same card as the the All-Ireland final itself, but obviously they wanted to release players back to their clubs as quickly as possible. But I feel it would have benefited. And yes, Colm makes the point about the All-Stars. It's not known if there is, I haven't heard it anyway, whether there is going to be separate dedicated All-Stars for the Tailteann Cup participants. So that side of it, I don't know. I'm pretty sure it'll be revealed or announced today, or certainly clarified as to whether that's the case. But by its very nature, it will be very, very hard to float a secondary competition like this that essentially with a lot of the weaker teams, in the same way that Division 3 and 4 during the league is hard to float too. That's just the nature of this.
Yeah. Rory, the one fixture that stands out to me as being completely unstandoutable is Sligo v London. Unremarkable. Like that's a regular fixture in league and championship, and London are in the north. I looked at this last week. By latitude, London is more southerly than Offaly. So they've got this all wrong. Offaly should be in the north, London should be in the south. But it is a fixture list to kind of make you go meh a bit, isn't it, Rory?
Yeah. Sligo are at home, aren't they? They're first out. They were first out of the hat. So so you'll have the London lads travelling over. Yeah, look, I suppose. I mean, the nature of the whole competition. I think Mick Foley was on with us last week, Mikey, and he made a very salient point in that it's here now and we should look to try and make the best of it. I think you probably won't really be able to appraise it properly until you get to the end. You'd like to think that there would be an element of All-Star attached to it, or certainly whatever they want to call that. That would add a certain impetus and make it, there is an incentive, I think, potentially to guarantee Sam Maguire status in terms of qualifiers for 2023. Is that right, Colm? It could be.
That's right, Rory. Yeah. So. And obviously that element of it is something. If you're Cavan and you're in a Division 3 campaign next year, there's no guarantee that you get there's no guarantee that they qualify in a difficult. They've obviously, I think, a better chance to get back into Sam Maguire status by winning the Tailteann Cup. They may well win Division 3. But this is summertime, there's less variables in terms of weather, and maybe just being caught out in the adverse weather conditions through February and March that might trip them up. Whereas, they've come off the back of a very strong Ulster semi-final performance, and they're most likely to push on. But to answer your question, yes, Tailteann Cup winners are into the Sam Maguire round robin next year.
Yeah, and it's in now. And look, I think this was obvious. This was John Horan's grand plan, obviously, when he was president, to try and get a secondary competition up on the go. It was meant to be in, I think, maybe 2 years ago, and obviously global events took over, and we know what happened then. It's here now. It's a pity that it's starting off on a sort of a weak footing in terms of launch, etc. It is probably going to be a slow burner. I think Colm is absolutely spot on. You're probably not going to really see any major public interest in it until possibly you get to the semi-final stages, and the final then obviously being a precursor to one of the semi-finals. But yeah, it's a Division 3, Division 4 competition. Like it is by its very nature going to be slightly uninspiring to a certain extent. You just hope that the counties that are participating in it buy into it to a certain extent, to as much as they possibly can, take it seriously in some way, and then you might get something that you can build on. Like whenever you introduce something new, it's like Hawkeye, it's like any new rules, it's like round robins, it's like the Super 8s when that was obviously tested. You are going to have teething issues with everything that comes in a new format, and this may settle down to become quite a good competition in time. I just think it's, probably starting having gotten out of the wrong side of the bed maybe this year, and that's pity.
There is a value in winning a trophy. I mean, there are only so many cups that a team can win in any year. If you look back to Wicklow winning the Tommy Murphy Cup in 2007, and within a year, they had beaten Kildare. Obviously, Mick O'Dwyer was with them at the time. Within a year, they'd beaten Kildare in a Leinster first round. And a year later, they went and won 3 qualifier games against Fermanagh, Down and Cavan on successive Saturdays in Auckland. So there was a bit of a bounce in winning for a county like Wicklow. And maybe for some of the weaker counties in this, there won't be a whole lot to it if Cavan win, because they've been Ulster champions 2 years ago. But if some other team came with a run, I'm not exactly sure, but possibly if it was Wicklow or somebody got to a semi-final, that'd be a really, really big thing for them. It'd be bigger for some counties than for others. So if you could see some of those teams make their way through to semi-finals, at least it would be a real help, rather than Cavan, Westmeath, possibly Tipperary, or some teams like that we expect to come through. It'd be good to see somebody from a Division 4 team to make it through to the semis at least, and maybe into a final. That'd be a real benefit.
Yeah, and if you're a manager of any of these teams, surely you should be saying to the players in the team, we're going to give this a lash and try and make it work. Because if you don't, this is the month of May. You're looking at a break now, if you're trying to build a team, from May till next February, when the league starts again, to have any type of serious competition. So if you could extend your season by 6 or 8 weeks for this, it'd have to be valuable in building a team for the future, which a lot of these counties are trying to do. It's the first opportunity for them to play football at the right time of the year against similar opposition. It's a win-win for the counties, but the PR behind it has always been poor, and the public image has been poor. So hopefully there's enough goodies on store today from Croke Park to pick this up into something important.
Yeah.
One final point, Mikey. The Tailteann Cup does not need a round robin. It just does not. It's a 15-game competition as it stands. If this goes to a 34, 35-game competition next year with dead rubbers and all sorts involving Leitrim against Carlow, 2 men and his dog at it, like, you are setting it up to fail. It does not need a round robin. Just doesn't.
But there is the argument about these
Rory,
teams see games.
That's already voted in. It's to
crazy.
follow for parity with the exact parity with the Sam Maguire side of it. So
bonkers.
You'll have a lot of cameras to get around the place next year.
No, we won't.
And a lot of sound engineers.
Yeah. Up high cranes behind goals. No, but
even on a practical level, imagine the amount of referees, linesmen, everything like that. The logistics of organising this whole thing next year is going to be completely beyond, I think, the scope of the GAA.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. The managers, a lot of the managers say they want games against as many games as possible to develop. That's the mantra that you hear. But the public interest point that Rory makes is fair, and then the logistics point that you make, Colm, is also quite fair. So I guess we'll see how the first year goes. And but it looks like, as you say, the round robin is cast in stone. Okay, 2 matters in Ulster. Colm O'Rourke, if Derry are to win the Ulster title, it could be called perhaps the perfect Ulster title if they're going to have to go and beat the 3 teams who've won the thing every year since 2011. As far as I know, Donegal, Monaghan and Tyrone. They beat an off-colour Tyrone very comfortably. They let Monaghan back into it a bit at the end yesterday, but I think nobody really thought anyone but Derry was winning that match. And if people are going to start describing Monaghan as being off-colour yesterday, you might have to start thinking about what the common factor is here. Rory Gallagher's Derry team maybe have a habit of making opponents look a little bit off-colour.
Yeah, and they weren't too far away last year against Donegal, so this isn't a sort of a bolt out of the blue. They had a good championship run. They had then that very good league run in Division 2, when I think that they were the system worked against them. If you recall, they got a draw against Roscommon when they should have got a win. Shane McGuigan was sent off in the wrong. And then, of course, in the last game, Galway put out a dummy team against Roscommon in the league. So it all played against Derry. And so they have made solid progress. It's not a flash in the pan. The performance against Tyrone took me by surprise, I think, like everybody else. I still expected Monaghan to beat them yesterday, a hardened outfit, but they seemed unable to cope early on with the defensive blanket of Derry. So on the basis of last year's championship match, this should be a really, really close game. I would not say entertaining game, because both sides are going to obviously lean heavily on a 17-man defence. So it's going to be tight, probably low scoring, but Derry are the story so far.
I have to say, Colm Keys, I find Derry quite interesting to watch. I think they're it is kind of the classic Rory Gallagher template, all right, but with some some fantastic kick passers there, so they're not just running the ball endlessly. Like they are looking to kick the ball, but when they run it, by Jesus, as they showed in the second half, they can run it, and they've got some fantastic inside forwards. But the basis, it's fair to say, is the kind of suffocation of the opposition. And like people said last week, Monaghan liked to play against a set defence. Well, here was a set defence that they couldn't crack.
Yeah, they haven't conceded a goal now against Tyrone or Monaghan, which is testament to obviously the way they've set up. They've made themselves very, very difficult to beat, but they can add a bit of variety to their game too. I think it's fair to say that they're not just all about defence. There are some fast breakers there. If you saw them at Bradley Point, fantastic point, ran the length of the field. If you look at Oren Lynch's kick for the second goal over the top, again, there's variety there. Obviously, Conor Glass brings great pace and energy to the middle as well. So there's a lot about them. But obviously, Garrett McKinless has become the key player, and he's one of the fastest breakers with the ball, while he's also a magnificent defender, a magnificent tackler. And I think, to be fair to Rory Gallagher, he got all his matchups correct yesterday.
And seemed very happy about it at times.
Obviously, Jack McCarron was well held by Chris McCaig and Brendan Rodgers on Gary Moan. Just the matchups were all correct, and he's put himself. He's a very, very good coach. Obviously, lays out the team pretty well, and this is, I think, he's the first manager to bring teams to an Ulster final, to three different counties to Ulster finals, which is something John O'Mahony would have done in Connacht, and obviously Mick O'Dwyer did it between Kerry and Laois and Kildare. But it's a rare thing for a manager to bring three different teams to provincial finals. He hasn't won any yet, but I give them a very strong chance in this. Based on last year's performance, as Colm said, they were very reluctant to shoot in the closing stages. They may have got a draw, and it took a Patrick McBrearty winner from distance to get Donegal over the line. But Derry really had their chances, and they were in that game for a long, long time. So that given that they've probably improved quite a bit since then, it would give them a really strong shout in this.
Yeah, he's a real kind of personality manager, Rory. I think as much as I got used to Wexford under Davy Fitzgerald always being referred to as Davy Fitzgerald's Wexford, it kind of like he became the star player on the team. There's a touch of that with Derry, isn't there? That Rory Gallagher is kind of seen as like he's almost the star of the show, despite the wonderful players that they have.
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned before, some of the sideline antics can be, like, are they distracting? Are they, an unnecessary? Do they add a bit of color? Do they add a bit of pageantry to the whole thing? To my mind, I quite enjoy it because it's great from a TV perspective. But I suppose, as Kevin McStay mentioned when we were speaking about it, it's not so good if you're the opposition manager. I think, in fairness to him, that sort of injection of passion, that's the gesticulation to the crowd, I think it kind of generates a really good sense of goodwill in and around the team. It gets the supporters up and going, and he's created a really good mentality. I think the players you can obviously see the players are playing for them. They've had some knocks and blows through the league. They obviously lost one of their better midfielders when he decided to go to the States. That didn't really seem to stall their momentum in any way, shape or fashion. They've actually gotten better, I think, despite maybe a stuttery finish to the league campaign. And I think they're a big team to watch now, and it's going to be an absolutely fascinating Ulster final. I mean, I presume it's going to be in Clones. They'll be sold out. They're obviously neighbouring counties, so there's going to be fantastic rivalry, fantastic colour around it all. And as Colm mentioned, like, what an achievement to take three different counties to Ulster finals. Is it for Donegal and Derry? Obviously, are the three, Colm, I presume, isn't it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, like, that's, he has something. I often kind of wonder, is he the kind of manager that maybe the Cork footballers or somebody like that, like a docile sleeping giant would need that sort of injection into them just to sort of shake them out of their stupor. But, like you won't be getting him to come all the way down from Killybegs down to Cork anytime soon, I'd imagine. So he's happy enough tipping away with Derry, and they're flying it. I think from Monaghan's perspective, it's just it's a bit disappointing. Like, I mean, they scored 11 points. Like, Jack, if you were to offer Banty before the game, right, you're going to say Conor McManus and Jack McCarron are going to score 11 points, admittedly mostly frees. You're going to get 5 points from play from your 2 midfielders and your 3 half-backs. You're going to get 17 scores, and you're only going to concede 12 points. I'd say Banty probably would have taken the hand off you for that. And ultimately, it was the 3 goals that cost him. And it might seem very cliche, but look, that's they went after goals. It's a couple of really well worked. Benny Heron, absolutely excellent second goal. So, it's got like they're flying, and good luck to them.
Yeah. Man, go on, Colm.
I'd find Rory Gallagher on the line a bit of a distraction. I often wonder, does that do anything for players or the crowd? Derry have quite a small following for football anyway. It's largely South Derry. They're not traditionally huge followers of football at county level. The thing that would concern me about the Derry performance yesterday is good teams get a lot more than 12 points in a game, because you need to strip out the goals from a lot of these performances. And most teams, I think the point you'd make, Rory, would be 16, 17 points. Normally, that's what a team should be getting in points. And then add in a goal or 2 on top of that. If you have a team stuck at, say, 12 points, that's quite a low figure in sort of perfect weather conditions for football. And it's normally not good enough to win the big game. So if they were to score a total of 21, I'd prefer to see them getting 118 than 312, because oftentimes the goals dry up, particularly against sides like Donegal.
Yeah, you're kind of like the argument of outscoring them. I think Wexford outscored Westmeath the other day in the hurling, but unfortunately Westmeath had a few goals in there, which is the problem. What about Colm O'Rourke? Monaghan going into the qualifiers now? They're hardly, they're not broken. They're still Monaghan, and they're a big fish in those qualifiers, and you wouldn't imagine too many teams would fancy getting them.
No, certainly not. Monaghan are probably in the top 6 in the country, but are find it very difficult to get beyond that. And I don't think anybody would say Monaghan are likely to win the All-Ireland coming through the back door, as some counties would have done in the past. But they will still be very, very difficult to beat, and capable of taking a big scalp or two to get to the stage where they'll be playing some of the winners of the provinces in the quarter-final. Could you see Monaghan beating Kerry or Dublin? No. But certainly Galway or Roscommon, yes. And maybe Donegal or Derry again, I'd say quite possible. But I think that's their limit.
Yeah. Okay. We'll leave that and go down to matters in Leinster. Sorry, columns.
Could be. This would be quick.
Yeah. We won't dwell too much on the game, but Colm Keys, I was interested in Desi Farrell's comments after the match. Asked about our Dublin back in race for Sam Maguire. It's not about All Ireland for us, I can assure you. That's nonsense anyway, Colm Keys, isn't it?
If it's not about All Irelands, I'm not sure what it is about for Dublin. But I have to say, as bad as Meath were, and Meath were poor, and the more that Dublin stripped them open, the worse actually Meath became, and the scars of previous heavy defeats to Dublin really told very quickly. But I thought Dublin were superb in the first half yesterday. They had 18 shots for points, 17 scores, just some of the precision. And I got a real sense of renewal about Dublin, and probably most reflected in James McCarthy's performance. He got up from half back to score 2 points, with just some of his positioning and some of his drive. And, he makes that acceleration over 20 meters, and he just opens up everything. And that was probably missing a little bit from him last year. He's captain now, and he's chasing a record 9th All-Ireland medal, and I feel he's really driven. And I thought he was very, very pivotal, obviously, with Kieran Kilkenny, and Conor O'Callaghan looked very, very sharp at times in the first half too. And Meath really had no answer to them from very early on. And I thought a white flag went up in some cases in Meath, and obviously they closed the gap a little bit in the second half, but that's a false premise. That's basis for nothing really. And Dublin just They were like roadkill against them, unfortunately.
Yeah, Rory, Dublin obviously chastening, humbling, I think Desi Farrell called it, their Division 1 campaign. So far, they have made mincemeat of a bad Division 4 team. They have humiliated a bad Division 2 team who they love humiliating. And now they're going to play their fellow relegatees from Division 1 in the final. Normally, you could say with the Dublin of old, or the Dublin pre-last year, you'd say, it doesn't matter how weak the Leinster Championship is, they'll hit their ground running in the quarterfinals. I suppose now we do kind of have our questions, because the last time they went up against Division 1 opposition, they were relegated from Division 1. So Colm talks about renewal, kind of like it'll have to be tested. Like, it looks like they're going to win Leinster now, but the questions won't go away until they win a quarter final against a contender.
That's fair. But at the same time, like we mentioned a couple of weeks ago about the warm weather week they went off for in Portugal, and I think that they have a week or 10 days out there. It was during the Easter break, so whatever physical work you might get done, whatever training you might get done, I think what sometimes that, like, I've spoken to players that have been on those, and the one thing they'll say to you is, surprisingly, the one thing that those types of activities can do is it can clear the air and clean the slate in terms of the atmosphere in the dressing room and in terms of morale, because you're in each other's ears and you have no choice but to talk to each other about any problems that you might have. And that was the noticeable thing for me. I know dismantling Wexford mightn't have been something, to be writing home at Christmas about, but at the same time, it was the manner of the way they did it, and then it was also the manner and the way they played yesterday, would suggest to me that there's a renewed spirit amongst them. It's absolutely fair that you can't really judge until they come up against a team that, is playing at a similar level. And Meath are obviously mid-table Division 2, so that's going to be difficult to achieve. But I think, look, they've got a lot of good players back. Everybody, I mean, they have Larkin O'Dell, I thought, played really well. Watched the match there this morning. He filled in. I think, was it centre back? Was he kind of more or less? He played.
He was centre forward. Brian Howard went to centre back, and Larkin O'Dell was actually
Howard went to centre back.
He's centre forward, and Kieran Kilkenny was
and then obviously I'd look the tip of the spear with Conor O'Callaghan coming back in, and like we've already mentioned, like even the goal or the penalty that he got. He catches a ball inside, his ability to turn. He's just a nightmare. We mentioned as well this before, he's at a David Clifford type level. We shouldn't underestimate the value of what he gives them up front and how much he changes the weaponry around their attack. So they look like James McCarthy, looked like he rolled back the years, kicked a couple of great scores from play. They have like Brian Fenton, again, looks like he's after rediscovering a bit of form. And I think I'd say they're waking up this morning, despite obviously the poor challenge from Meath. I'd say they're waking up this morning and happy out.
Colm O'Rourke, where do you stand on the Dublin good, bad, or Meath bad debate? Like, how far either way on this graph are you going?
Well, I think it's the worst defeat that I can ever recall that Meath experiencing on the hands of Dublin, because it was all over in 15 minutes. Like when Dublin went 5 up, there was no way back for Meath at that stage. But I did say after the Wexford game that I thought this is a different Dublin. And I think you look at the thing, Dublin have the best panel of players, or the second best panel of players, only to Kerry.
Yeah.
And for me, it was just a question, are this group going to be motivated, have the same togetherness that's needed to win in All-Ireland? And I think after last year, that defeat stung a bit, and maybe the criticism of them stung. And it was obvious from the Wexford performance that they were back together again. And I would think that a lot of these players are saying to themselves, there would be nothing nicer than when we have appeared to be dead and buried to come back and win another All-Ireland. And you can imagine for the likes of James McCarthy, motivation now for him to go up to Hogan's stand and put the Sam Maguire over his head. That must be a massive motivation for him after winning so much as he did, and to get the honour of captain the team. Strange that he wasn't captain even before this. But Dublin, I think, are in very good working order. The likes Lee Gannon, Larkin O'Dell, Tom Laheath, they have added a little bit to it. But when you look at the range of players they still have, to me, better players than anybody else, including Kerry. And I think the game of the championship is when Kerry and Dublin meet. And that's, get your tickets in advance of that. I think it's going to be in the All-Ireland semi-final.
Yeah.
And I think that'll see the first 80,000 crowd in Croke Park this year. That'll be a game to savour. But I can't see anybody else. The clinical nature of Dublin was incredible. When they won All Irelands, they used to run up a total of 4 or 5 wides in most of their big matches. Last year, they were not nearly as clinical. In the first round of the league against Armagh, they had 12 or 14 wides, and they were back to their ruthless best yesterday. I don't see them stopping. I think this team, the Dublin team, they've rediscovered their hunger for it. Look at Fenton, Kilkenny, Brian Howard, Conor Callaghan, Dean Rock. Like, those fellas are still as hungry as ever. Mick Fitzsimon's like a young fella bolting out of the back. A team in rare order.
Colm Keys, the Kildare attack will certainly give the Dublin defence a fair test, but I think most neutrals looking at that yesterday were wincing at the thought of what, as Colm O'Rourke describes as a clinical, economical Dublin attack could do to this Kildare defence. It's definitely the Achilles heel with Kildare, isn't it?
Yeah, and it was something that they had worked hard on, and actually during the league there were signs. I was at the Kerry match in Newbridge, obviously different conditions and different environment in St. Conleth's Park. They restricted Kerry to 13 points, which was a fair achievement. And David Clifford, Mick O'Grady did fantastic on David Clifford that afternoon. But you go into Croke Park and I felt they were very, very loose. They were very loose, and some of that is fractured. Some of that good defensive work looks a little bit as if it's fractured. But obviously, different challenge coming down the tracks to them now, and I'm sure they'll reassert themselves. They do have some very, very lively forwards. Obviously, Daniel Flynn is a real handful, and he was a real handful in last year's Leinster final. I mean, he got that superb goal, and I think there was a point as well in the first half. He has magnificent movement and magnificent hands, and you really don't know what's coming next from him. But he's got good support there now from Darragh Kerwin and Jimmy Hyland, two of their most promising underage players who are really coming strong too. So their inside line is very, very decent, and they themselves will take a bit of watching by the Dublin full back line. But I think Dublin have really set down a marker with what they did against and how they did it against Meath, particularly in the first half, and that elevates them for me a little bit ahead. Kildare, not ironically, very, very much on cue. Dublin Kildare will now contest all 3 provincial finals. First time that's happened. It's the first time Kildare have been in 3 Leinster finals in the same year: minor, under 20 and senior. And when you combine that with the fact that Naas reached last year's Leinster club final, and obviously at schools level Naas are so strong as well, they're Hogan Cup winners. Things are really on the move for Kildare. So irrespective of what happens in the Leinster final, they are a county very, very much mobilising and have asserted themselves as definitely the second best team in the province. And I think they will be that way for some time.
You mean men are going to have to look at how Kildare are mobilising this huge population growth on the commuter belt, and how Kildare are doing it. Do
we see it being competitive? Do we see the Leinster final being competitive, Colm?
Well, I think if Westmeath scored 215 against Kildare, it's hard to see Dublin not scoring more than that. And Kildare got one goal in 21, which is a huge score to run up in any game. I can't see it. I can't see anything other than a reasonably easy Dublin victory. If Kildare got to it in 4 or 5 points, I would be surprised.
Yeah, could be entertaining though. I think you get the impression, yes. Hopefully more entertaining than yesterday.
I would certainly hope, but I think Kildare will have a different approach to what they had last year. They were very cautious, no real ambition. I don't think that will wash with the Kildare public this time though. So, and even the players, I think, will want to go out, and if they lose by the same margin but lose differently, a little bit like Cork against Kerry, if they went out with that approach, And I think the margin will obviously come in a lot lower than that with Cork and Kerry last week. But I just feel that they'll take a different approach than they did last year, and I think their people will want them to. And it may end up around the same place, a reasonably easy win for Dublin. But I think they'll take a lot from it, Kildare, to press on.
If Kildare are going to win, there's only one way they can beat Dublin, and that's score about 4 goals. So their whole sort of attacking should be built around scoring goals. Forget about points.
Yeah, and pray, I think. Rory, finally, the last word is on Munster. Billy Lee stuck it to you. You continually wrote them off, and they did the job. 2-10 to 10-point win over Tipperary. So they're on the grand prize of playing a very well rested Kerry, who are letting their players back to play club football, I see as well. So they're going to be well rested, have a few matches in their legs, and Limerick are coming up against them.
Yeah, not only that, then they have to go down to Killarney as well, where Kerry are training every night of the week at the minute. So the task doesn't get any easier, and they're fighting for places down there. It's a difficult game for both teams because, what kind of credit are Kerry going to get for winning the game, which inevitably they will do? Not much. And like from a Limerick perspective, what's the best that they can hope for? In fairness, look, they have had, I think Kieran Whelan mentioned
penalties.
Last night.
They want to go to penalties.
I think Kieran Whelan, yeah. The last thing about the penalties was within a week, sure, though, how about the penalties was all forgotten because we had penalties in a rugby tournament the following week, so everyone was talking about that. But anyway, that's another day's story. But the issue around, look, I think Kieran Whelan mentioned it last night. They're very much in bonus territory, and I think he's spot on in that they have gotten promotion up to Division 2. They're going to be playing a lot more competitive football. They're going to be playing Dublin in the league next year, and Cork and Clare, and so they'll have a few derbies thrown in. I think the key thing for them is to just go down now. They played well. Again, Josh Ryan is a right handful at full forward. They've got a good spine to their team. But, look, they're going into the bacon slicer really down in Killarney on the 28th, 3 o'clock throw-in as well on a Saturday afternoon, a Munster football final. Interesting, see how that one pans out in terms of a crowd. But, so look, I think from Limerick's point of view, they can just go down and have a cut. There's no pressure on them. No one's giving them a chance. And I think from their point of view, as Wheelo mentioned last night, they're in bonus territory. They'll be in a qualifier. They might draw Cork, and they could be Cork. You could see them in a quarter-final, depending on how the draw pans out.
True. All right. We'll leave it there for the football chat, lads, and we'll be back in a minute to talk to Jackie. So I'll say thank you to you, Colm O'Rourke, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much, Mikey. Bye. Keys up. See you, Rory.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Welcome back. We've been joined by Jackie Tyrrell to talk about hurling. Jackie, how are you?
Good, Mikey. How are you?
Sure. I'm all right. I'm grand now. We'll talk about Munster first. When we get to talking about Leinster, my mood may deteriorate slightly. My only saving grace is Rory's old bugbear, the camera angle. The camera angle in Monaghan means we were spared the gruesome details. It was
Hurling is hard. Hurling is a hard game to film at the best of times, trust me.
Wexford are finding it a hard game to play at the moment as well, so yeah. Anyway, we won't start there. We'll start with the we'll go down to Cusack Park with which had nice camera angles, which is just as well because we were treated, lads, to an absolute clinker of a game, Jackie. I saw a few reports saying the standard maybe wasn't as high as you might expect, but I think that's nitpicking. I think we got we got by the end of it. It was a precursor to the Munster final, and I don't think there's a person not looking forward to the Munster final after that match yesterday.
Yeah, maybe that comment is a little over critical, I'd say, Mikey. Sometimes when games are that physical, that intense, there's just stalemate at times. And how many times did a guy get a ball, run into two guys, get turned over, then he get the ball, he was turned over, and the ball was just left there for kind of 15, 20 seconds, and a ruck was formed. It was that physical, it was that intense. Some of the points scored by Tony Kelly in particular was the performance of Diarmaid Burns I thought was outstanding. But I suppose the big thing coming out of it is that, look, Clare are thereabouts with Limerick. They stood up to, I suppose, and I would have always thought Clare aren't really a physical team, but actually with the guys back now, they're actually really big and strong, particularly with Conor Cleary, John Conlon, Dahi Fitzgerald, or David Fitzgerald, and then Peter Duggan's addition in the forwards with Cotton Malone. So they have all They tick all the boxes when it comes to taking on Limerick, taking on anyone. They play a really, really interesting brand of the variety that they play. But I would say the emergence of, we say, the supporting cast like Colm Malone, like Ryan Taylor, like Rory Hayes, who's probably one of the top cornerbacks again, it's been the real help, along with the likes of Tony Kelly and Shane O'Donnell. They have been really driving it on. But it was a fascinating game. It was gripping. I thought the first 15-20 minutes, it was breathtaking stuff. I was kind of struggling to see how will they sustain that. But once again, like, and it'll get lost in it, Limerick found the answers again. Like, they got a lad sent off, they're down some of their marquee players. We just kind of take it for standard that Limerick will always perform and will always die with their boots. They have to be given huge credit again. They didn't get beaten. It wasn't looking great from at times in the game, particularly when Garrod Hegarty got sent off. They were in trouble in certain aspects of the field, but they dug it out. They dug it out again, and that's a real sign of this team and the champions that they are.
Yeah, Colm, when you look at some of the stats, it's incredible how closely matched they were. Like, points from their own puck out was like 1-6 for Limerick, 9 for Clare. Points from opposition puck out, 3 for Clare, 2 for Limerick. Turnover points, 10 for Clare, 11 for Limerick. Points from throw-ins, 2 points each, and they finish level. Like, so the two teams yesterday were very evenly matched, but of course, like, the pessimists among us will say, you know, Aaron Gillane, Keane Lynch, Cathal O'Neill were in the stands, and John Kiley had the luxury of leaving Darragh O'Donovan and one of his corner forwards on the bench and bring him on late on. You know, so it wasn't a full strength Limerick, and Clare have players to come back too, but at the same time, Clare will take huge amount of confidence from this.
Yeah, and just to develop Jackie's point, or just reiterate it, I suppose, because he developed it well himself there. The one parity that was very, very clear yesterday was that physical equality that seems to be there between Clare and Limerick. And I thought it was probably apparent in the Cork match 2 weeks ago, when I felt for a long time Clare bullied Cork in their pursuit of the ball. They were ferocious in that, and they essentially carried that into Cusack Park again yesterday. And Jackie is right, down the spine of the team from Conor Cleary. I mean, relocating John Conlon to centre back has really, really worked well for them. And Peter Duggan hasn't been around. He's finding his feet too. And David Fitzgerald's move up front, I think that's another big benefit for Clare hurling this year. So, you know, you can never measure those statistics in terms of physical impact that they're the great and ponderable, but you could see it yesterday that Clare are one of the teams that can really stand up physically to this Limerick team. And in Cusack Park, and we'd make the point, Cusack Park is as big as Croke Park, it's as big as any of the main grounds, but it has that claustrophobic feel. The crowd are right on top of you. It was a real derby, it's a real validation. Yesterday's occasion in Cusack Park is a real validation for the round robin series in terms of atmosphere, what it creates around the town, and of course that rivalry with something to play for. So Clare are right up there on the coattails of Limerick. Granted, as you say, Gillane, who has been in terrific form for Limerick in this competition so far, and obviously Keane Lynch has been missing since early in the Waterford game. Probably will be back for the Munster final in 3 weeks' time. I would imagine if it's a regular hamstring, 6 weeks should take him pretty close to it. If he could be on the bench too. And Cathal O'Neill has really sprung. So yes, Limerick have a lot of players to come back, a lot of influential players to come back. But there is a great mix about Clare. They've introduced Shane Meehan yesterday as well. He's a real live wire forward. He can give them something different too. So it's a game, I think, for everyone to look forward to. But in the immediacy, of course, there's who makes the third place. That's really riveting. And again, another validation of the round robin series.
Rory, the forwards, you know, often do get a lot of the credit. Jackie will shake his head ruefully, obviously, and Tony Kelly's getting a lot of headlines this morning. But in Rory Hayes and Conor Cleary, Clare have two inside defenders who they make any team in the country at the moment without a shadow of a doubt. I think they'd make the Limerick team. I would make the argument.
Big time. And the one noticeable aspect from yesterday, from our point of view anyway, certainly, because goals always kind of light up a game, was the paucity of goal chances that were actually created. I don't think did Clare have a goal chance yesterday? I don't think they did. And I think Limerick's was only 1, which will give you an indication of how good both inside full back lines are. I mean, Mike Casey and Sean Finn and Barry Nash. Barry Nash was outstanding, you know. So, like, I think both full back lines, and they're really problem positions for an awful lot of intercounty teams. Well, they certainly are for some anyway. And I just like in Rory Hayes and Conor Cleary, it was like we were kind of half expecting the wrestling match between himself and Kyle Hayes, which we got to a large extent. And I think in fairness to Colm Lyons, and I know there's been a lot of criticism of him for certain aspects, but I thought he actually contributed to a good show, a good game, in that he let as much of it go as he possibly could. Now I know people will say, "Oh, look, that's Nemo Rangers bias popping in there, and I'm only standing up for Colm." But I actually think, like, in general, people are way too harsh on referees. Like, the game of intercounty hurling now, right across the board, is largely, in my view, borderline ungovernable. There are so many areas around the game that are just like they're effectively, if you look at loads of different aspects, there's loads of gray areas and teams are pushing it to the limit. You know, like I noticed, I'd say on about maybe 6 or 7 occasions yesterday where the goalkeepers were stepping way outside the small square for the puck outs. That's never called at intercounty level. It's not like that they don't have enough length on the puck out to begin with. You can take as many steps as you like. You know, the ball now is no longer hand pass, really. It's largely thrown unless it's particularly obvious. And he did pull a couple yesterday. What's a tackle? Unless it's a head-high collision, they won't blow for a free. So effectively, you know, fill your boots and do whatever you like. Free taking, right? Free taking is a big one for me. I think and Patrick Horgan is right up there in terms of culpability on this. I think they've been fouling the frees for years. Like, when they load the ball onto the hurley pre-strike, that ball isn't meant to sit there for 4 to 5 seconds while they control it and then strike. You know, TJ's a master of it, Patrick Horgan. But to my mind, they're actually fouls. Never called. So that rule now has been done away with. And then you look at the pulling and dragging that's going on. So when you combine all of that, yeah, look, there might have been a bit of a muchness around the Garrod Hegarty, and you could probably argue, did he deserve to be sent off on the 2 yellows? Maybe not, right? But, like, it's a very, very difficult job in terms of how fast and how everything that's going on. If I was to have one small criticism of Colm yesterday, I did find it astonishing that there were only 3 minutes additional time, because I timed it back. I think there was about 2.5 minutes of sorting out with Garrod Hegarty's second yellow, because he obviously didn't want to send him off. There was about 3 or 4 stoppages at least, and I think there was 8 substitutions used across both teams.
Rory, we'd got to classic, let's just call this one a draw territory.
Maybe. But 3 minutes did seem a little bit on the low end. Yeah. But overall, look, I mean, just to reiterate what the lads said, I mean, we were down there. I mean, what an atmosphere! What a victory for the round robin! What an occasion! The atmosphere inside there was just electric. The atmosphere around the town was fantastic, and yeah, it's just a pity now that it's nearly all over.
Jackie, but we might as well touch on the Garrod Hegarty incident. I don't think too many people thought either of them were yellow cards. And I think there's definitely a case now. He's entered the territory of being slightly condemned for being Garrod Hegarty. But the counter argument there is, just don't give Colm Lyons anything to look at. Just you have to be an altar boy. I know that might be difficult, but, like, as soon as the whistle goes, just be an altar boy. Just stop. Don't react to anything. Don't do anything. Just, like, he has no other choice now, because for a start, he's massive, so he can't be missed. And secondly, he does have a bit of a reputation, I suppose, for having a temper or whatever. And you probably know well enough that, not saying you, but teammates, etc., that can follow you around and can be very hard to shake.
Yeah, I can remember in Kieran's college, there used to be when detention was on a Friday and the list used to go up during the week and everyone would be gathered around looking at it. And the same culprits were always on it, because I'd say if a teacher came into a classroom and there was trouble going on, they'd pick out the 1 or 2 usual lads and they went straight on detention. I feel Garrod Hegarty is probably after going into that realm. Neither of them were a yellow card. How the first one was a yellow card baffles me. I get the whole he shouldn't leave himself exposed to get involved in that kind of stuff, but we're playing a game of hurling that has never been as intense, never been as physical. like, what did he actually do wrong in the second instance other than try tackle a guy? His hurl was there. I thought the big call out was how the Clare defender went down and made it out that he was shot. Like, I do understand Garrod Hegarty. He's a big physical man. He plays on the edge. He's quite physical. Sometimes he fouls, sometimes he doesn't. But he has definitely been watched for his physicality. He's definitely been watched because he's mentioned on these kind of films. He didn't do anything wrong yesterday, but somehow he found himself on the sideline. And obviously hugely frustrating for him. He's waking up this morning. He's been spoken about this week. And he done nothing wrong. I actually feel for the guy. Like, it just made no sense how he could be booked when he's just trying to take a sideline that Limerick always do quick, and Dave McInerney stood in front of him. I think the accountability needs to be on the players that are feigning injury and that are going down and making this bigger than it actually is. And yeah, he is. You could possibly him, Aaron Gallan, Austin Gleeson. They are being watched very closely. Like with Kilkenny. When we played, Tommy Welsh was watched, I was watched, Noel Hickey was watched. And we
there's a good hit list there, Jackie.
There was, but like,
you could go on.
But like, you know, I suppose, like, how does he go playing the game and putting in huge tackle counts every week? Of course, his hurl is going to be in areas where it's going to be low, or someone could wrap it around and go down. But you just have to kind of go. You hope in the spirit of the games that lads aren't going to really injury. And like, if that's the road we're going down, well, then we're in trouble because we can't lose that physicality.
Yeah, so Colm, John Kiley said he was going to appeal, and as much as we all give out about the appeal process and how it's undermining referees, there's not a hope in hell Garrod Hegarty's sending off is going to stand, I don't think, is there?
But does he need to appeal, Colm? Does he need to appeal? I mean, there's
no, he doesn't need to appeal, Rory. He doesn't need to appeal because he's not suspended. There's no suspension pending. So it's only if Garrod gets 2 more yellow cards and a red card and a similar offence would then lead to a suspension. And at that point, Limerick could appeal either of the yellow cards in yesterday's game, and of course they'll get off. So really, he can be probably sent off on the double yellow again if he so chooses, or if a referee so chooses, and he won't serve a suspension. It won't apply because I think he'll get off with either yellow card from yesterday if an appeal does take place at some point in the future. But just on the point Jackie was making, there was for a long time almost a code of honour in hurling, much more so than football, where there was no theatrics, no diving, no remonstrating from opposition sideline. I felt the reaction was very, very strong from Clare towards Limerick. Obviously, it's an instinctive thing, and they see a player down, and they're calling for attention from the referee to go and do something about it. In a place like Cusack Park, that's the atmosphere crackling. There's a lot of pressure on for a referee to actually go and act. And in the middle of all this is Garrod Hegarty, who we know can be very, very loose at the hurl. We saw it in the All-Ireland semi-final in 2020 with Joe Canning, and obviously earlier this year he does. There isn't any question. He has a reputation for it. In this instance, I think anyone fair-minded would say, no offence here, he connected with the hurl. There was very, very little force in it at all. I don't think we can say it was an offence at all. But obviously, he sails close to the edge all the time, and I think that reputation definitely preceded him yesterday. But it is creeping into the game. I think we saw it in the league semi-final with Austin Gleeson. Players are going down a little bit quickly, drawing attention to referees to offences like that. We are seeing a lot more of it in hurling, which was never there for a long time.
If you remember the 2009 final, actually, and Jackie will obviously remember it very well.
With Benny Dunn and
Tommy Walsh, and he hit him a right belt now, in fairness. Yes. And Tommy went down initially, but he was up but he only went down because of the ferocity of the belt. But he was up like a shot and just jogged off. No, I think Dermot Corwin had no choice in that situation, but it wasn't because Tommy was rolling around the ground, you know.
No, he got up and he moved away pretty quickly, and you would have seen that was quite prevalent for a long, long time. But in the last 2, 3, 4 years, you're certainly seeing a play on referees a lot more. And I think we've seen it a few times this year where that's creeping in. Can't say whether that was the case with Aaron Fitzgerald. Had something happened earlier in an earlier incident that maybe there was a delayed reaction to it? I don't know, but he certainly went down quick in that incident, and it led it led to the decision-making process. There can be no doubt about
It must have been a long delay, Colm, if something did happen.
I don't know.
It's John Kiley's obviously had this on his mind for a while, because obviously Jackie, after towards the end of the league last year, he kind of made comments after the game against Galway, kind of, you know, which he then went on to retract, which in a kind of made a bit of a palaver of the whole thing. But like, yeah, he didn't say it in the first place for no reason. It's obviously something on his mind. He knows he has a big physical team. He knows they kind of have a reputation now, and they know they're the best team in the country. People want to beat them. So I'd say this is something John Kiley was worried about, but I don't think John Kiley alone is worried about. This is not something, I don't mean to come across as kind of like, I said, like some old school quarterback like yourself, Jackie, or some protector of the game. But really, you don't want to see this in hurling, because one thing about hurling is 30 lads with sticks running around the field trying, you know, chasing after one ball, and you get hit. You get hit at every level playing hurling, and it's almost like golf. There should be a code of honor here. Rory's talking about Colm Lyons having an impossible job. The job becomes more impossible if people start feigning injury in hurling, because you could feign injury any time the ball comes near you.
Yeah, and Rory alluded to all the difficulties and the challenges that a referee are faced with. So if this is another one, and it is one, it's as Colm alluded to, it's gone on in the game a couple of years. If this is another one that referees have to deal with, and there's so many bodies around rucks, how can a referee police, well, he actually got hit or he didn't get hit or he's going down soft? So we have to take that on as players, that we have to play it within the spirit of the game. And yeah, it's we all want to win, and if we see the role that soccer has gone down and how hard that is now. But the only way to do it is to punish guys that do it and come down hard on it and try stamp it out again, because it's too hard to referee games and too hard to police things if we have big, strong guys. Lads have never been as strong, but they've never been going down as soft.
Yeah. Okay, we have a fair bit to get through, so we better push on and let Rory talk about Cork. You never doubted them, Rory. You never doubted them.
No, I did. But listen, one swallow a summer does not make. I wouldn't be getting too excited at the same time. I think I kind of feel sorry a little bit for Waterford, more so than anything else, because I do actually think they would probably be in a better position to take down Limerick and give Limerick a better game had they managed to make it through. Can you trust Cork to go out next week and get the job done against Tipperary? I'll leave other people make judgment call on that, but I think from a Cork perspective, yeah, I mean they went out and played. It was just it was just bizarre. Like, I mean, some people were saying they could sense it coming. I was kind of going, I don't know. I mean, there was a few different aspects to the performance yesterday that I definitely think they got right. I was hugely impressed with Luke Mead. I think he definitely gives them a little bit more shelter in that defence, and especially when you've got such a young lad who again played really well yesterday, and he's going to be something else, lads. This fella will be, oh, what a player he's going to be. So Kieran Joyce, so Luke Mead, I think definitely helped, just put a small bit more solidity, did a lot more hassling and harrying and a lot more of the donkey work that maybe the midfield choice weren't doing in the past. I thought Conor Lehan rolled back the years. I was delighted for him. Obviously Harnedy got man of the match. Thought Conor Lehan probably gave him a run for his money, and I think the introduction of Tim O'Mahony up front was massive. Obviously going in there at full forward made a huge difference, and he gives him an option to go along. And I think, look, I said this before, there is a possibility that Patrick Horgan's role may be changing, and that might be coming sooner than we think now.
Yeah, Jackie, it was interesting to watch, because we've been talking about the size of the Waterford squad and like the strength of their panel, but it was the Cork bench yesterday really that kind of that almost kind of won the game, wasn't it? Kingston and particularly O'Mahony coming in. Cork were already going well, but it really, like, they put daylight between themselves and Waterford after those substitutions.
They did. They offered a lot of punch to the team, and I always wonder, why is Shane Kingston not starting for Cork? I think he's one of those forwards that just has that pace and power that can just burn someone. And maybe his role now is like when he came off the bench against Kilkenny last year and changed the game, like the weekend when he came on and made a huge influence with Tim O'Mahony. Maybe that is his role. I feel he should be starting, but if he can come on and contribute like he did, at both ends of the field, you see the hook and the work rate that he got to get back and turn over the Waterford guy. I think it was Jack Pendergrass or Peter Hogan. So he offers, he's one of those players that when he comes on, he always contributes. And maybe Tim O'Mahony position him at a 14, switching him into 11, offers that focal point of the attack. But definitely, it's amazing how one performance can change it. I thought Seamus Harney was best man in the field, but I thought Robbie O'Flynn was brilliant. I thought his work rate, because Cork don't have that kind of a dirty ball player that just does that dirty work, gets the hooks and blocking, and his run for Alan Connolly's first goal, where he just decided in the middle of the field, I'm getting up off the shoulder here, and the pace and the power he showed was brilliant. But there was a bit of a new look to this Cork team. Joyce, I thought, was very good at 6. Mark Coleman seems more comfortable at 7. Luke Meath does offer that shield there as well. But my big gripe is, why are we sitting here after the third round at the round robin, and Cork have finally come to table with a bit of anger and a bit of physicality? Why, when they were embarrassing in All-Ireland last year, were they not seeding to get back, show signs of it? Why on round 3 do we have to wait for them to bring physicality and work rate? Why wasn't that there in the first round and the second round? Fair enough, things don't happen, but they need to bring that every day. Their hurling mightn't flow some days, but at least show the Cork fans that they'll show up, they'll front up, they'll get in their face, they'll get hooks and blocks in. You'd like to think that that is the base for them and they go forward with that. If they do, they have a chance. If they don't, it'll just be the same old Cork.
Yeah. Colm, sometimes you read people say, that hurling analysis and punditry can be a bit simplistic, and a lot of talk about physicality and intensity and stuff like that. But actually, in fairness to Shane Downey, he pointed it out in a very X's and O's way on Sunday game last night. He's just like, this is how close the Cork defenders were to every Waterford man for the puckouts, and this is what they weren't doing against Clare. And it was just obvious. It was like they were making life difficult for Waterford, where they made life very, very easy for Clare the last day.
Mikey, you can only see what you see. And against Clare, you could just see that the desire to go to the ball from the Cork players collectively, it just wasn't there. It wasn't there in the way that it was there in Walsh Park. That desire, that drive to win contact ball, anything like that just wasn't there in Thurles 2 weeks ago in the way it was. And, Cork probably have turned a corner here. And Rory referenced Tim O'Mahony going up front. That was something I felt was obvious after the Limerick game, that they had no physical target up front. Seamus Harney, he obviously provides that too. But Tim O'Mahony has a lot of experience at underage and club level, underage for Cork and club level of playing up front. And that's something they can probably develop in time. But it really has fallen for Cork now in the way that the last round of fixtures could play out. If they beat Tipperary and Waterford, obviously
if they beat Tipperary, they're through. If they beat Tipperary,
that's it. Yeah. So
if they beat Tipperary,
that's fallen really well for them. Tipperary obviously have something to play for, something small to play for. They obviously need to beat Cork by 7 points and hope that Waterford are beaten by 8 in Clare. It's very, very unlikely. So it really, for Cork, it's playing out in front of them, and they're very much favourites for the third place playoff. Amazing how it's gone after 2 pretty poor performances in the opening rounds. One of the things that Kieran Kingston said after the Clare game was that the players may have been feeling the pressure from some of the media, some of the commentary around that. That surprised me. I didn't think that was a great sign, but obviously they've got over that. And sometimes when you're so far off the pace, it's almost like Rory McIlroy in a major. When it's almost out of sight, he starts to play. And maybe that's the case with this Cork team now, that they're better when they're not in the driving seat, when they're not favourites, and they deal with that a little bit better.
Well, it's funny you say that, because Rory, this is definitely the narrative growing around Waterford now, isn't it? Is that they don't like being favourites, they don't like being fancied, they prefer to be coming from behind and kind of in the operating in the shadows.
It is amazing though. I mean, there was a nervousness that you could probably detect locally, I think, in Waterford if you were listening and reading some of the commentary in advance of it, and it just lacked a little conviction. Maybe you saw Liam Cahill kind of issued a rallying call, and I was kind of saying, does he sense something that the rest of us here maybe don't really read? It was unusual, to say the least. But it's absolutely extra. It's the beauty and the cruelty of the round robin mixed into one, in that the first day out, they're on the back of a brilliant league campaign where they've won the National League only for, and they haven't won it that often, as you think it might have only been their 4th or their 5th. And then They have a very good win against Tipperary at home where the pressure was on and Tip put it up to them. And now all of a sudden, within the space of a couple of weeks, their whole season is derailed. It's, it's amazing. Like this round robin is just, it's such a brilliant format, and it makes hurling
not for Waterford,
but it just goes to show how quickly your season can spin, on one result. And all of a sudden, one thing I would say, I really, really hope that it doesn't come down to scoring differences and scoring averages, because Seamus Harnedy scored a point yesterday, which was waved wide. And I know that, right? And I know that Clare got 2 points in the round robin game that Cork played, where one went off. They got a 65, which Tony Kelly pointed, which was obviously wide. So I just hope that it doesn't go down the road of scoring averages. I don't think it will, but you just hope that doesn't come into play, because look.
Are you advocating a sit-in protest on the Semple Stadium next Sunday afternoon?
No, but I think how the umpire didn't see that one go over. It hit the inside of the post and went in.
How great. We had a discussion, Rory and Mikey, back in March about the hurling league and how false it was and how uncompetitive it was. And really, it's been proved with the results. Limerick beat Offaly on the last day, drew with Clare. They're into a Munster final. We always expected that, but Clare also had an indifferent league, and they're in a Munster final. Yet Wexford win their first 4 games. They're hanging on by a thread now in Leinster, and obviously Waterford are the league champions, hanging on by a thread to Cork. Obviously, they're in a stronger position now, but they had a pretty decent league. So
they need to do something with the league, though. I think, Colm, they need to incentivize the league better. And people say, well, how do you do that? Look, I don't know. There are lots of things you could do. Like if you win the league, for instance, you play all your round robin matches at home. Teams would take it fair serious then, wouldn't they?
Yeah. That would probably defeat the purpose of the round robin.
Yeah, but otherwise you're back into a load of arse boxing and false shadow boxing.
Yeah,
then again next.
There is a fair section of the year now from February through to March where it's largely uncompetitive and inconsequential.
They're Oireachtas Cup games,
Yeah.
Did you play in the Oireachtas Cup, Jackie?
I know, Rory. How old do you think I am?
Right.
No, I never played in the Oireachtas. I think it was changed into the Byrne Cup and the Walsh Cup and then various different names. No. I think Michael Kavanagh has about 8 or 9 Oireachtas.
Right. I think Colm used the W word there, so we better get there. Yeah. By W word, I mean Westmeath, because that's. I could go down a chasm of despair here, and I'll get a good laugh. But let's be fair to Westmeath. This is pretty amazing result, Jackie. There's been a lot of hand wringing about, promoting hurling in the weaker counties, and kind of the Joe McDonagh Cup's not getting a shop window, and it's about trickle down, etc., etc. I don't think much could do. What could do more for hurling in Westmeath than this result, other than a win? Obviously, this is huge. This did actually send tremors around the hurling world, and I imagine it'll be talked about in Westmeath a lot more than the Tailteann Cup Draw is today. Put it that way.
Yeah, I'd say there's only one sport in being talked about in Westmeath today. What a sensational result! It was unbelievable, and there's a quality of player in this Westmeath team. You go through that team, like normally a team like that might have 1 or 2 marquee players. You think back traditionally to Westmeath and the Leashes, they'd always have a kind of a figurehead. Even if you go back as far as Dublin, it was kind of Conal Keaney, and then they came. This Westmeath team, like if you go around kind of hurling people, to be able to name 3, 4, 5 guys, we'd obviously be able to name more, but like if you go back like right across the team, Tommy Doyle is as good as a hurler around there. Yeah. I would argue Dara Edgerton is as good as a cornerback that's out there as well. This guy against Shane Conley last year in the Joe McDonagh final was sensational. Did a really good job on Rory O'Connor. An unhurled, brilliant cornerback, outstanding. Killian Doyle, David Glennon obviously transferred as well. They have a really
the service that Derek McNicholas is after giving them.
Correct,
I mean, what age is he, Jackie? He must be about 35 or 36, I'd say.
I heard of him, so that'll tell you how old he is, and it's still producing.
He might even have an Oireachtas Cup medal.
But this has been a huge, and David Glennon got sent off. It looked like it was slipping away from him. Wexford had a couple of points on him. They got the goal at the end, so they obviously kept believing. what Joe Fortune has done with them more mentally and physically, they kept playing their system of play. And it's not just long ball. They're well able to mix it short and long. So it's been a huge, huge performance. But like Laois a couple of years ago when they turned over Dublin, they need to build on it. They probably need a bit of help. They need a bit of support from the GAA as well. Because hurling is in probably a good place in Westmeath now, as good as it has been in a long while. They need to nurture that because we need as many teams being as competitive and getting better and stronger to make our round robins even more competitive next year and the year on after.
Yeah, Colm, the one of Wexford and Dublin are going to make it through to an All-Ireland quarter-final where they're going to play one of Clare and Limerick, unless they get beaten by Joe McDonagh finalists, which on recent results and form you wouldn't rule out. And I'm not being facetious or trying to be funny there, you genuinely wouldn't. When you look at the scores teams are racking up in the Joe McDonagh at the moment, Antrim and Offaly, etc. We haven't got time to get into this debate right now, but there is no denying that if you take Galway, a team from Connacht, and Kilkenny, the perennial, kings of hurling, out of it, Leinster hurling doesn't look great at the moment in comparison to its western neighbours.
Football doesn't look good either.
No, it's not, Mikey. I think that's probably been the case. You take Kilkenny out of it. Yeah. That has largely been the case. I'd be disappointed that Dublin haven't come stronger. Obviously, they've beaten Galway in recent years. 2 very good wins last year too. They got their win in Wexford Park, which probably I feel will now more than likely get them into that preliminary round playoff.
Barring an amazing result in Nolan Park on Saturday night.
I don't give them a chance in that game. Not when you're drawing with Westmeath. I know they'll throw everything at it, but I think Kilkenny are a good bit ahead of them now, obviously. But I'd be disappointed with Dublin, some of their performance. I'd be very disappointed with them, how uncompetitive in the end they were against Kilkenny on Saturday night. And you're right. I mean, I think that there is quite a gap growing between the better teams in Leinster now, which are obviously Galway and Kilkenny. They're starting to get away from the rest. Obviously, notwithstanding Dublin's win over Galway in recent years, but we'll see how the last game in Saltail plays out. Yeah. But for sure, there's a gap there.
Rory, I was obviously on social media after the match, which is a curse. I think I was sitting outside my children's bedroom waiting for them to fall asleep, so I was torturing myself reading Twitter reaction to the Wexford match. And you see this awful thing seeping into GAA now. It's a bit like simulation in hurling, kind of the over-the-top reaction to results. So that I'd say it was almost trending the hashtag Egan out. It's just... Like, Darragh Egan's in his first year. He certainly has a lot of good ideas as a coach. But at the same time, if your goalkeeper drops 2 balls and your team hit 21 wides, I don't see how that's the manager's fault.
Definitely not. And you have to, you do have to, persist. I think Darragh Egan, and we had Liam Sheedy on. He was Darragh was in with Liam for a few years, and Liam spoke very highly about him in terms of him being a very deep thinker on the game. He obviously has got a great pedigree as a player as well. Look, I mean, it's again, it just goes to show this round robin can, it's like a roller coaster, and if you fall out, it's very hard to get back on. And that's probably what's happened with Wexford. I think that first night they just didn't really fire against Galway. They probably snuck a point, and then the following week, where they're playing at home a second time in the space of a week, and then they get turned over by Dublin. I think they're just the spirit probably went out of them a small bit, and that's what allowed Westmeath to get in and nick a famous result and get a great draw. The one thing I would also just add, and Jackie mentioned it about their players, they went toe to toe with Kilkenny for it was about 47 or 48 minutes before Kilkenny finally put them away. They have been putting in, unlike Laois, we'll say, they've been putting in very spirited displays all the ways through. They've been really having a go each time against all of the teams. Okay, they've been shipping the odd beating, and that's going to happen. I just think Joe Fortune and everybody that's involved down there deserves huge credit. And I think, just to echo Jackie's sentiment, you just hope that they build on it now, give them a budget, give them more money. That's ultimately what it'll all come down to. If you can plow, good finances in behind them, get their fitness levels up to a certain level, because they certainly have the hurling.
Yeah. A word then on your lot, Jackie. I'm thinking Saturday night, I might do some. I might beat myself with a stick, drink some battery acid, stick some matchsticks underneath my fingernails, and then I might go down to Nolan Park and have a look because
I'd suggest stay at home, do a bit of knitting, Mike.
No, this is research. I want to go down and see this Kilkenny team now. Almost at this stage, I'll go down hoping for a shock, but really just hoping to see, a good old fashioned Kilkenny whamping of Wexford, which I grew up on. How good is this Kilkenny team, Jackie? Because they've humiliated Dublin twice now in the league and championship, and you could. We don't know where Dublin are exactly. They did manage to beat Wexford in Wexford Park, but obviously Wexford aren't. The problem here is that Kilkenny, the only match they've lost is to the team that aren't from Leinster. They're doing what they usually do to their Leinster compatriots. I'm just wondering, how do you think they stand up to, say, the Limericks and Clares at the moment?
I would say they're a bit behind Limerick, and maybe even Clare at this stage. I feel they're still feeling their way around. They bet Laois and Westmeath. They lost to Galway, which was a real test. Realistically, on Saturday, they didn't get a test. If you look at the Dublin team, outside of Donald Burke, they got 2 points from play. One was from Reem McBride and the other was from Mark Schutte, a sub that came on. So really, there was no real test. I would say there's from the first game, there's a better feel to this team with Richie Reid at 6, Paddy Deegan moving to the wing, Cian Kenny positioned in a 2-man full forward line. TJ hit a bit of form the weekend. Mossy Keown is kind of one of those real dogs of war, but he's very underrated, and you see his piece of skill for his goal. This guy is well able to mix it. He has all the skills to be able to be a really, really good forward. The worrying thing from Kilkenny point of view is earlier in the year, Walter Welsh and Pádraig Welsh were really leading the line from 10 and 11.
Pádraig was taken off on Saturday.
They've struggled. They've struggled the weekend. And ultimately, when the pressure comes on in games and you need to lump the ball down to your half-hour line to win ball, in Wally and Pádraig, who are our main men, they aren't doing that. And what that'll force to do on the weekend, maybe again Wexford, if they're not doing it, TJ will maybe have to come out, Owen Cody will have to come out, and we need those guys inside. So that will be a concern from a Kilkenny point of view. Midfield seems to have settled themselves down. Adrian Mullen is a big fillet there. He got 5 points again the weekend. Alan Murphy was good as well. So I won't say they're unknown, but there's still a few questions that have to be answered. You would look, it wasn't much of a test the weekend. They got a test against Galway. They hadn't all the answers, but they are starting to move the pieces around and reconfiguring things. Conor Delaney was good the weekend, but they will be hopeful to get Hugh Lawler back maybe to the tail end of this round robin.
Broken hand, is it, Jackie?
Broken hand, yeah. So look, hopefully, a broken hand is a broken hand, but hopefully if he could get back for a Leinster final or maybe later on. But Conor Delaney had a good game there the weekend. So I would say they're starting to move the pieces in place. But the Walter Walsh, Pádraig Welsh, they will be hoping from big performances at the weekend.
He's not messing around, Jackie, is he, Brian Cody? He took off TJ Reid at halftime against Galway, and he's taken off Walter Walsh at halftime here. He's he was always decisive, and ruthless would be a word people would use him, but it also shows he must have some faith in the squad players as well, because he wouldn't be doing that if he thought he had nobody to come on and play in place of Walter Walsh.
And Billy Ryan did really well, I thought, when he came on.
Yeah, and I suppose the team that he released and the team that started, the guys that came in did really well. Cian Kenny got 4 or 5 points. Obviously, Mossy Keown got 2-1. And Alan Murphy contributed on the scoreboard as well. So there are some options both on the bench, and that although hasn't settled on his 15, anyone that seems to be coming in is doing the business, and there is competition for places there. I would worry that there is a reliance on TJ and Owen Cody from a scoring point of view. Although Owen Cody didn't score the weekend, TJ kind of picked up the mantle from them, but they are crucial to Kilkenny on the scoreboard in particular.
Yeah. Okay, lads, we might leave it there. Colm, I know we discussed football already, but just a brief mention, poor Meath hurlers, the Joe McDonagh Cup is not being a happy hunting ground for them. They're pointless. Just mention that, I don't know, as an aside, but just to mention that Antrim are into the final, and Offaly, barring defeat against Carlow, are into the final, and there was just some astonishing results there at the weekend. Antrim scored 7-29 against Meath, and the Offaly Kerry game was an absolute stonker. It was 4-23 to 2-28 win for Offaly below in Tralee. So the Joe McDonagh Cup,
that would have been a difficult game to cover and have a report ready for the final whistle. I think I wouldn't have envied any of the lads covering that game. It was a real score fest end to end. Just looking at the highlights and reading some of the reports, it looked to have been a fantastic match.
Yeah.
If it is Antrim and Offaly, that's a renewal of the relegation playoffs. So they're building up quite a rivalry, and they look like just about the best teams in it, particularly Antrim.
Yeah, and whichever one of them get Dublin or Wexford, I'm not joking, fancy their chances. All right, thank you to Colm and to Rory and to Jackie and to Colm O'Rourke earlier, and we'll be back with you Thursday to look ahead to the final round of the round robins. Thanks very much. Good luck.
Crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. He hits it.